the name of the game is called Impromptu/Let's Go, right? So what I want to do is see if we can have, I know, yeah. I want to see if we could just have a 5-minute conversation about an interesting thought. And then in 5 minutes, we just stop no matter what. Mr. Nate's going to make sure we stop. And I'm going to give you 3, right? So I'm going to give you like 3 statements. I want to see how you think through them. We'll talk for 5 minutes. After 5 minutes, we got to stop no matter what. Is that fair?
No, I don't like that.
Yeah, I like it already. All right.
Okay.
So here we go. All right. I'm going to pick an interesting one. All right. Have you ever remembered something that you haven't learned yet? We call that knowing, right? All right. So let me give you an example. All right. So remembering something you haven't learned yet, we'll call knowing, right? In philosophy and what you will find in many spiritualities, African spiritualities, Middle Eastern, whatever it is, right? But here's an example. Okay. If I said to you right now, there was a study done that said that the hotter it is outside, the more violent prisoners in Texas are, right? You would say...
Of course I know that.
You knew that, right?
I definitely know.
Except that you hadn't learned it yet, right? So you just remembered something. You just remembered something that you hadn't learned yet, right?
Yeah.
We call that knowing, right? And so I would love to know, how does that land on you, this concept of knowing, and do you think it's something that it can actually happen, right?
Well, my first initial feeling is anger because...
Why are you angry about it?
Because why are you asking me this so early?
Well, because I think it's a fascinating thought.
It is. And it's so funny because I feel like knowledge is pretty much based on what you've been given. So like,
tell me what you mean, yeah.
The reason why I knew that was true about the heat and how it relates to actions with prison members.
Right.
It's because like growing up.
You went to prison? No. Okay.
I say that.
Okay, all right.
We talked and said if we played this game, you wouldn't do this.
I'm sorry. I'm quiet.
All right.
I'm trying.
I will shut this.
I'm trying.
Okay.
All right.
No, but like growing up, you know how like when it gets hot outside, you'll hear like my grandma or my mama say like, people start acting crazy.
Yeah, they did. Yeah,
that's when you saw the most fights.
Yeah, it's true.
I heard the most gunshots during the summertime. So like that's how you correlate the two. Like when it starts to get hot, you can just pretty much guarantee that somebody
is going to do that, right?
Is going to do that, yeah.
And that's knowing, even though you never heard any study, right? If I said to you, is there a study you've read, or do you have any definitive data? You'd say no, but you still know it to be true, right?
Yes.
And that's fundamentally different than how we've been taught you can do things in the Western way of knowing, right? You're not allowed to know something without any definitive proof of it in our world.
Correct.
Except that you just did, right? And so that's why I think it's a really cool concept. So what happens in my mind if you open that up to spirituality, right? What if you can know things spiritually without any definitive proof of them?
I can honestly say I've never thought of that before. Give me an example.
Well, I think for me, one of the most basic is really the idea of goodness, right? I believe that people inherently know what's good, right? You can look at even babies, right? And if a baby watches you punch your child, right? The baby gets sad, right? The baby, I'm just saying, like, I know it's an extreme example. I've never punched my child.
So many questions.
But to be clear,
is this based off of research?
No, but it is based off of things that, you know, over the course of my educational career, they've talked about how people have visceral reactions and children have visceral reactions to things that we believe are wrong that they wouldn't know are wrong yet, right? But they do. And I think to me that goes back to what Scripture tells us in Romans chapter 1 is that things are written on our heart. Truths are written on our heart that we just know, right? We may not have any definitive proof of them, but we know them. And in my mind, that idea of knowing truth without definitive proof says to us, hey, everybody is being pointed back towards God because they know, even if they haven't been taught.
Because that takes, and this is a little bit off subject, but it reminds me of a conversation. I think it was in staff meeting.
Okay.
How we talk about spreading the gospel and going out to other nations that had no civilization.
Yeah.
And how would they ever know if we don't get to them and everything else?
Yeah, and it does. That's exactly the point, right? And we believe that, right?
Right.
We believe, essentially, most Christians would argue, all right, yeah, even if we don't get to them, we know that they know because the spirit in them tells them, right? And that's the idea of knowing. But I think that's what's really cool is that's not how knowing is thought of in our Western world. And that's why I love thinking of it that way, right?
I love how you keep putting emphasis on the Western world.
Well, yeah, because what we find is that there are systems that govern how people behave, think, function, things like that. And we don't think about how they're different, right? But our way of knowing in the Western world is, if we went all the way back, we'd put it in the scientific revolution, we'd call it the Enlightenment age, all of those kind of things. But the idea for the first time was, you know what? The only way you know is if you follow these scientific methodology and things like that, right? And that began to shape how we know. But cultures before that didn't have that, right? They didn't have that idea. In fact, for them, spirituality and science were the same, right? And so for us, science happens over here, spirituality happens over there. But for them, spirituality and science were the same. And so for them, spiritually, you could just know things, right? And then scientifically, you tested them out. But for us, we're like,
5 minutes.
man.
I feel like